Welcome to the Sarah Finkelstein Show, where just a few minutes gives you great financial planning tips, money tips. And thank you for being here today. So, today's topic of conversation is stress good or bad for you? Well, actually, it could be both. So, I want to read to you from the Stanford Medicine News Center about stress and what stress can do. And let's start out with the following. Chronic stress has been associated with increased biological aging, suppression or abnormal regulation of immune function, impairment of brain structure and function, increased susceptibility to some types of infections, and worsening of conditions like depression, heart disease, and some types of cancer. Now, that would be a stress that is not good for you, or shall we just say, bad for you. So, what kind of stress are you experiencing? And stress is so very common that we deal with it on a daily basis. So, let me talk first about more of the bad type of stress. But first of all, I want to talk about the fight or flight response. I'm sure you're familiar with that. That's when your heart beats rapidly when something happens and you're afraid of something. But that's good because it builds up your adrenaline. Without this response, without the flight or fight response, a lion has no chance of catching a gazelle and eating to live another day. Without this same response, a gazelle has no chance of escape. And that fight or flight response can save our lives. The bad stress can have, as we said, a very negative impact on your health. And since we all deal with stress on a daily basis, the important thing is to be aware that if we have stress that is uninterrupted for months and months and years, it could have a detrimental effect on our health. Now, I want to share with you a book that I read called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which is a parable, but it's a story about a very successful attorney. And because he was oh so successful at winning cases, he got more cases dumped on him. And so he was constantly working around the clock and against the clock, meeting with his deadlines. But he was very well respected, very well sought after by clients. What happened was one day he had a heart attack, and his doctor told him that he must slow down and he must stop working as an attorney because the stress was just too much. Now, although this story is a parable, I am sure it's not far from the truth. I am sure that there are professionals that have tremendous stress levels and it could ruin their health. So, this is a great book. I strongly recommend it. Trying to get this straight here, by Robin Sharma. It's called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. He gave up all his possessions to live a calmer, more peaceful life. You know, we get accustomed to all of our possessions, our expensive cars, our big homes, our fancy jewelry, and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. In terms of bad stress, I could tell you that one form of possible bad stress that goes on and on and on without interruption is when you are caregiving to an elderly parent who has a chronic illness. Now, I have heard of many cases where the caregiver became ill themselves. And just as an example, I could share with you story of clients going back a number of years. Carol and Abe. Abe had Alzheimer's. Carol was always taking care of Abe. She was his caregiver, and everything was about Abe. It was stressful. She never had time to take care of herself. And it was always, well, after I do X for Abe, after I do Y for Abe, I'll go to the doctor and get myself checked out. Unfortunately, this story has a bad ending. Carol passed away suddenly, leaving Abe on his own. This is the kind of stress that being a full-time caregiver to a loved one can have as an effect on you. So, stress can be good, but it could also be bad for you. Of course, some people are more resilient to stress than others, just like some people have a greater tolerance for certain conditions. But let's now talk about the good kind of stress. And there is good kinds of stress, isn't there? For example, planning your wedding. There's so much work that goes into planning a wedding. It could take months and months of preparation, and sometimes it could take more than a year's worth of preparation. And that kind of stress, it is stressful, even though it's a good stress, it's a happy stress, but it's still stress. Another good type of stress, at least for me personally, is planning a trip, getting ready to go on a trip. When I know that I'm going on a trip, I start in advance. I open up the suitcase and I throw things in there periodically when I say to myself, I want to take that blouse with me, or I want to take that pair of shoes with me. I'll just periodically throw items into my suitcase. So I start in advance. And when you're flying internationally, typically what I found is the flights are early in the morning. So I would have to, or we would, my husband and I would have to set the alarm clock like 3:30 in the morning to be able to get to the airport early enough for check-in and delays and things like that, or traffic, or who knows what. But when that alarm clock goes off, you just jump out of bed because you know you have to get to the airport. And you'd rather get there earlier rather than later. So that is also a good type of stress. I think another good stress is when you're working on a project, maybe a project for work or a project for family. Like, for example, I just was invited over the weekend to a surprise birthday for a friend of mine's mom who was turning 75. And my friend had prepared for months for this event. And it wasn't just a one-day event, it was a 3-day event, it was a weekend event. And that was stressful. But it was also a good stress because it came out of love for her mom. So there's all kinds of stress. And it's important to make sure that your stress doesn't linger on for months and months and months without interruption. So what can you do about stress? Now, stress needs to be alleviated so it doesn't have that negative effect on your health and well-being. So I have some pointers for you. By the way, one more effect of the bad stress is that it could impair your ability to think clearly, to plan appropriately. In regards to your finances, if you cannot think clearly, you cannot make wise financial decisions. That's another effect of stress. So it's important to get reprieve of the stress. It's important to, let me share some tips for you. Number one, very important, is get rest. Get rested up. Get good sleep. And participate in some activities that you enjoy to kind of break up all of that level of stress, that continuity of the stress. Maybe pursue a hobby that you enjoy, or take a walk on the beach. That is so relaxing, and it's also so beautiful to walk on the beach. Read a book that you find interesting, or watch a movie, preferably a movie that calms you down, maybe an inspirational movie. Socialize, get together with some friends, go out to lunch with friends, or even go shopping with friends. Not groceries though, but shopping for something that you'd like to have. Music is another good activity. Just listen to some music that you enjoy, and it'll reduce your stress level. I know during the pandemic, what I did was I did adult coloring books, and I found it very relaxing and very therapeutic. So that I'm sure there's like 10 more things that I could name as ways to reduce your stress level. But it is important to get a good handle on your stress for your well-being, your financial well-being, as well as health, your your body's well-being. So to summarize, there is good stress and there is bad stress, but there's always something that we can do to improve our bad stress, and it's important to do so. And please visit my other episodes of The Sarah Finkelstein Show, and you could find it very easily by going to www.thesarahfinkelsteinshow.locals.com. Of course, you can find it on other platforms like YouTube and SoundCloud and Spotify and Rumble and Alignable, but that one is really easy to find. The Sarah Finkelstein Show.locals.com. And if you have any questions about anything that I like to talk about, topics of interest, feel free to reach out. See you next time.